changes are on the way. It happens in June. Well, welcome to Tim's Take, and today we have a very special guest. Is Dr. Craig Payne. Now, Craig is a associate professor in extension veterinary medicine and a lot more titles on top of all of that, but you specifically focus on beef cattle.
Right.
And beef cattle diseases and treatments and such.
Management, so on and so forth.
All right. Well, what brought you to Missouri? Let's get a little background.
Sure. No, I'm a native of the state. Grew up in Sedalia. Graduated from University of Missouri College of Vet Med in '93. Spent a year in Marshville, Missouri in private practice. Then I moved back to Sedalia, which again is my hometown, and was in practice there for about 11 years. Became an owner partner in that practice, and eventually left in 2005 and went to Kingsville, Texas to go through a program that was just starting up called the King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management. And so spent 2 years in Texas getting a master's degree in agribusiness. And as I was looking for a job, once I finished up that program, the individual that had been in this position I'm currently in, he had vacated at about the time that I left to go to Texas. And so the search committee was looking for somebody to fill that role. And so I ran into them at a meeting, and they recruited me to apply for this position. So I've been here since 2007.
Wonderful. And you've got a lot of practical experience having your own practice.
Right.
What we want to talk about today, though, is that there's some new changes coming along with some of our medications for our beef cattle and all of our livestock.
Correct. And this is a topic that I've been traveling across the state talking a lot about within the last 3 months or so. And it relates to changes to availability of antibiotics that are still over the counter for producers. And so, I guess the history on this is that if we go back to 2017, there were two key changes that happened that year. One of those is that any medically important feed-grade antibiotic that was available over the counter, it transitioned from being available OTC to requiring a veterinary feed directive. And based upon information that I have come across, it would indicate that about 115 feed-grade antibiotics made that transition from OTC to requiring a veterinary feed directive that year.
That means over the counter versus
right.
Essentially having a prescription?
Right. So the veterinary feed directive is what a veterinarian issues when a feed-grade antibiotic is intended to be used on an operation. It's a little bit different than a prescription. A prescription is specifically reserved for drugs, whether that be antibiotics or any other medication that FDA wants veterinary oversight of. Mm-hmm. They will classify that as a prescription drug. So one of those key changes that happened January 1 of 17 is any medically important feed-grade antibiotics, again, went from OTC to requiring a VFD. Another key change that happened is that any medically important water-soluble antibiotic that was available over the counter, it transitioned to requiring a prescription. And so that impacted, based again on information I've seen, somewhere in the neighborhood of 96 products made that transition. Okay, so to kind of wrap this up, what the total impact of what happened in 2017 is the way FDA tracks antibiotic sales and distribution here in the U.S. is that all the drug sponsors or those that own the rights to these antibiotics, they are required to report the kilograms of active ingredient in these antibiotics that they sell or distribute every year. And so based upon kilograms being our metric, what FDA estimated is that 96% of antibiotics transition from OTC to requiring veterinary oversight, whether that be a VFD or prescription, on January 1st of 17. So if you do the math, what that means is that there's about 4% of medically important antibiotics still in the marketplace that are OTC. And so what this change is that is coming here in the next month or so is those are going to transition from OTC availability to requiring a prescription. All the feed-grade antibiotics that needed a VFD, those made the move in 17. So what is left in the marketplace will be transitioned to prescription status.
That 4%.
That 4%, right.
Okay.
Right.
Not just veterinarian oversight, but actually a prescription.
Right. And so that veterinary oversight terminology is something that the Food and Drug Administration uses. Considering you got VFD and prescription, both of those require veterinary involvement. Mm-hmm. And so FDA considers or calls that in general terms veterinary oversight, trying to capture those two terms in one statement.
Okay. So what if a producer has a stock of this? Can they use it for a while, or?
They can. So this is a little bit different than the transition that we saw happen January 1 of 17. As we talked about earlier, there was a hard start date on January 1, 17, meaning that what the FDA expected is that regardless of when you purchased your feed-grade antibiotic or prescription or water-soluble antimicrobial, on January 1st of 17, they expected you to have a VFD from that point forward. In this case, we don't have a hard start date. Okay, so what FDA is going to allow happen is for any of these products that have the old labeling on them, they're going to allow those to be sold and used on farm without a prescription.
Okay, with the old labeling.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that labeling and what change is occurring that's going to make these require a prescription. And basically what it boils down to is that these drug sponsors are already in the process of printing what we call a revised label. And on that label is good. There's not going to be any other change to the label other than a particular statement added to it. And what that statement says is, caution, federal law requires this drug by the use or on the order of a licensed veterinarian. And when that statement appears on the label, it is at that point in time in which that antibiotic will require a prescription. Okay, so let's take a scenario. So we've got what I'll call old labeled OTC product in the marketplace. Again, FDA is going to let that be sold and used on farm without a prescription. But here before long, we're going to start seeing this new labeled or revised label product coming into the marketplace to replace that old label product. And when that appears in the marketplace to be sold or dispensed, it's that point in time in which it will require the prescription because the caution federal law statement is on the label.
So if I go to my favorite farm store, and I've been used to buying these over the counter, are they still there? I have to have a veterinarian's certificate, or do I have to get it from the veterinarian now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As I've done a lot of these meetings, that's a very common question that producers have on their mind. Not easy to explain, but let me kind of walk you through that process. Now, once these go to prescription status, it does not necessarily mean that you will only be able to get them from a veterinarian. But another way that I've gotten this question is very similar to the way you ask it. Will I still be able to get these at my local farm store when they do go that prescription route? And that depends. So keep in mind, these changes are happening nationwide, going from OTC to prescription status. How each state deals with or handles prescription drugs is varies, but here in Missouri, we're not so different than anybody else around us. So what the requirement here in our state, based upon our code of state regulations, is that any business that wants to sell or dispense even animal prescription drugs, it either has to be a veterinarian that is dispensing these antibiotics to a client that they have what is called a veterinary client-patient relationship, or the only other business that can sell or dispense these drugs is a business that has a Class A or a Class L pharmacy license. So a Class A license is much like what a human pharmacy would carry. It gives them the right not only to sell and dispense human, but also animal prescription drugs. The Class L pharmacy license is specifically reserved for a business that just wants to sell or dispense animal prescription drugs. The issue with the pharmacy license is not necessarily the cost of it, but the regulations associated with it. And so what we saw happen January 1st of 17, or at least in that time frame, is that the water-soluble antibiotics went from OTC to prescription status. A lot of the farm stores quit carrying them simply because they didn't want to have to get a Class L pharmacy license and comply with the regulations associated with that license. And so in the same way, what we're going to see happen this go around is that some of these more popular farm stores that we are accustomed to finding these antibiotics at, they're probably going to let inventory be depleted, but they will not replenish it with prescription labeled drugs simply because of that Class L pharmacy license requirement.
All right. So we will see a difference about how you get your yes.
Yeah.
So when they went to in 2017, did we see a change in the amount of the antibiotics used?
So based upon what I've seen over time is that when we're talking about feed grade antibiotics, which represent the greatest amount of use in the industry, information I've come across would suggest that we saw about a 35 to 37% reduction in sales and distribution as a result of them transitioning to requiring a veterinary feed directive.
Okay. And were these to prevent disease used, or were they used for growth enhancement?
Yeah, so there were prior to January 1 of that year, dependent upon the feed grade antibiotic, but some of them have what we call production claims on them, which could be either improved rate of gain or improved feed efficiency. FDA required that those approvals be removed from those products, so indications for that use were discontinued from that point forward. So what is left in the marketplace in terms of feed grade antibiotics currently is either for treatment, control, or prevention of disease, but those production purposes, those indications have been removed.
Okay. So it looks like in June, mid-June, all new products will be labeled differently, but the stores will be able to sell their inventory, and farmers buy that inventory and use that inventory until it's all used up. And then it had to go through their veterinarian.
Right. To get a prescription. Now, online pharmacies are fairly popular this day and time. I don't know if I can use company names in the podcast, but one that I'm sure that a lot of people are familiar with is Valley Vet. So that's a popular animal health or animal product online company. And so companies like that are already selling prescription drugs.
Okay.
So
they had that license, that Class L license.
So they already comply with state and federal requirements. So, that will be one avenue by which producers can get antibiotics. Again, doesn't necessarily have to come from a veterinarian, but in order to get it from an online pharmacy, that online pharmacy will require a prescription from the veterinarian before they ship that antimicrobial.
So what's the shelf life of what we've got in storage?
Yeah, probably a popular antibiotic that is going to be impacted by these changes are what we call LA200, LA300, or injectable oxytetracycline. Those may have a year and a half expiration date on the label. Now there's many other products that are going to be affected just than those two that we've talked about. Injectable penicillins will be affected, so whether that be long or short acting penicillin. I'm not familiar what the expiration date is on those or longevity, but that would be something to pay attention to, because I I know what people are doing right now when they catch wind of these things going from OTC to prescription status is they're beginning to stock up on that OTC labeled product so that they can get by for a while. But be mindful of that expiration date of that product before you purchase it, just to make sure that you can use it up before it does hit that date.
With this 37% decrease that we saw, did we see a 37% or a decrease in production of livestock or more diseases, or did we see a little bit of a change?
Yeah, there was no information to suggest one way or the other. Part of that may have been that people, as they visited with their veterinarian, because now a VFD was required, that discussion or that conversation was, they decided that antibiotic was no longer needed in the system for whatever reason that may be. But we don't have any indication if there was a negative impact on production or not.
Okay. So why make these changes? What's the reason for all this?
The primary reason is in relation to concerns of development of antimicrobial resistance. So the thought is that if we're using antibiotics or not judiciously or overusing antibiotics, we may be perpetuating resistance, not only in livestock, but there has been some ideas thrown out that our use in the livestock industry could also impact antibiotic resistance in the human population. I won't necessarily go into the pathway by which that has been proposed. Based upon information that I have come across, there's no conclusive evidence that our use in the industry does promote antimicrobial or contribute to antimicrobial resistance in the human population. I'm not saying that we don't have any impact, but some have implied that our use has a significant impact, and I think I'd have to take issue with that. But that's the primary basis for this change, is just trying to get more judicious use of antimicrobials in the livestock industry and animals in general.
Because many of the ones you mentioned, penicillin that came out in the 20s, tetracyclines in the 40s, we haven't. The basics are still the same as they've been almost 100 years now.
Right.
So we're not really developing new antibiotics. So we've got to protect what we have.
Yeah. So that development pipeline by the animal health companies, the release of new antibiotics, was if you look at historical graphs, we saw a large increase in the new antimicrobials coming into the marketplace from the 20s when penicillin was first released all the way up until recently, and now that's kind of plateaued. The cost of bringing those drugs to the marketplace is extremely expensive. So to your point, we've got what we've got for now. I don't expect we'll have much new antimicrobials in the future, or at least new drug classes. So, the thought of judicious use, protecting what we've got, making sure it's still effective, that's again, the basis of what this change is about.
Okay, well, thank you. So changes are on the way. It happens in June, and they'll just have to get veterinarians' involvement once the new stockpile comes in.
Right, once that new label product comes in.
All right, well, thank you.